I didn't see you there. I was, to me, I mean, today just felt like a nice day to sit and set up the cameras and lighting and whatnot and just act like I was recording a YouTube video without actually doing it. But I guess I am, so new stuff every day, I guess. Welcome to the Woodlands. I am Riley Woodsman. So we're in the month of October now, and that's, you know what that means. It's spooky season. And if you're an epic gamer like I am, that probably means you're gonna be playing a good amount of horror games, or at least discussing horror topics. So what am I gonna do today? Probably talk a little bit about horror games. However, today we are talking about a particular one. I don't know what this is. I don't know why I'm doing it. But the particular game that I'm going to be talking about today comes out in January, and the title of it happens to be in the title of the video, but I will get to that later. Also, fair warning, I'm not very good at this. So this video might be pretty sloppy. I might go from topic to topic, but fret not. I wrote a script in Google Docs. And hopefully that means that this video will at least be a little bit coherent, and maybe it'll actually go somewhere. So if you ask me what my favorite horror game is, like of all time, 4 years ago or something like that, I don't know, I just threw out a random small number, but a little bit ago, I would have told you Outlast. Personally, that game, like, terrified me like no other. Like, just the idea of being in a completely abandoned insane asylum, but the patients are still in there, and your only source of light is the night vision on your camera. For me, that fucked me up when that came out, which I guess it was like 10 years ago now, Jesus. But yeah, Outlast would have been... I would consider that my favorite horror game if you asked me that like a few years ago. Basically anywhere from 2014 to, I want to say like 2022. I don't really remember, to be honest. However, there's another game that I replayed recently, and I loved it as a kid, and I thought it was really, really fun despite being very scary. Even as a kid, it was, well, obviously as a kid it was terrifying because it's actually a horror game. But after replaying it recently, my conclusion, as much as I love Outlast, it's not my favorite horror game, or probably not even in my top 5. No disrespect to Outlast, I still love that game. But the crowning achievement, #1 favorite horror game for me, personally, is Condemned: Criminal Origins. Condemned is a horror game that heavily focuses on its atmosphere and visceral melee combat. You play as Ethan Thomas, an FBI agent who basically does detective work. He investigates the city of Metro, and he's looking for a serial killer that's been named the Matchmaker. Metro has been infested with crime, particularly serial killings. While investigating, he gets confronted by a killer, and that said killer ends up killing 2 cops who I guess have like ground beef for brains, and they both die a hilariously stupid death.
And the path takes strange turns.
Police, drop the weapon now!
So because of that very silly minute and how it played out, Ethan Thomas gets convicted of killing those 2 cops because the killer used his gun to kill them. I'm saying the word kill a lot. YouTube's gonna be so fucking mad at me. So with that whole problem, he has to clear his name and find the killer. Condemned is awesome. Like, I genuinely love it. Like, it's still really fun to this day, and it's actually pretty scary at times. The atmosphere is really quiet and dark, and it's really good at keeping you on your little tippy toes. I don't think it's nearly as scary as Outlast, nor is it quite as long either. However, I feel like, personally, what Condemned has to offer as a game, it's worth more and is a better experience overall than Outlast, at least in my opinion. It's still, like, really scary, and in my opinion, it's a lot more fun to rip out a pipe from the walls and smack some tweakers with it than it is having to run away from tweakers.
Again, no disrespect to Outlast. I still adore that game. I just prefer Condemned. I'm sorry.
Speaking of atmosphere, though, you know what other game has a fantastic atmosphere, as well as fantastic combat? I'll tell you the name of the game in a sec, but first, I need to say this sentence so that this video will smoothly transition into the next chapter. So I know it's spooky season, and I just got done talking about a couple horror games for spooky season, but there's another game I gotta bring up before I start talking about the game that is in the title of the video.
I told you at the beginning that this is going to be a sloppy experience. Just give me a chance. Just give me a chance!
So Condemned is my favorite horror game, but out of my favorite games in general, I would say that sits somewhere around like the top 25 personally. The next game I'm talking about is an indie shooter that comfortably sits in my top 5 games ever. You might have heard of it, you might have not. It's a game by David Szymanski, and it is called Dusk. Dusk is an indie FPS game that was heavily inspired by games like Quake and Chasm. And similar to Quake, it has direct influence and references to Lovecraftian horror. I personally don't consider Dusk to be a horror game, but if you drew a line that, like, if you cross it, it becomes a horror game, I would say Dusk is touching the line. Like, it's not crossing it, but it's touching it. It is so close to being a horror game. And now, I know what you're probably thinking, but Riley, if it's not a horror game, why are you talking about a game that is not a horror game during spooky season? This doesn't really make any sense. Stop it. Stop it. I'm gonna get to that. Just give me some time. I don't know why I'm like force choking the camera. You play as a man that is literally named Dusk Dude. That is his canon name, similar to how the guy you play as in Doom is named Doom Guy. Exactly 20 seconds after you click to start the game, you hear a voice in your head that just simply says,
Kill the intruder.
Then suddenly these 3 guys with chainsaws rush after you while you hold 2 sickles and you have to fight them off. Dusk wastes absolutely no time. There's no like lore exposition, no like build up or anything like that. You just click the game and it instantly starts. The gameplay is actually pretty simple and it's not that complicated at all, but it's so smooth and intricate that I get cripplingly addicted whenever I play it. This game made me fall in love with low poly graphics, and it was basically like the proof to me that just because a game has a realistic art style or is very highly detailed, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's appealing to your eye. For me, a game needs a good art style. Like, it needs to be visually appealing, and realistic graphics just don't really do it for me anymore, and they haven't done it for me since like 2015. I don't know, I just threw that number out there. But it feels like a long time. That's the point, is that it feels like it's been a while. I think Dusk has a beautiful art style and an incredible atmosphere. Each level looks and feels drastically different from each other, but at the same time, they all feel like they belong in the same world. Some areas have an almost calming set piece to them, like the level Old Time Religion. It looks comforting and familiar, but at the same time, it feels a little eerie. I guess that's just the definition of a liminal space. Then there are some areas that are just blatantly scary to look at, such as Crypt of the Flesh.
Embrace the darkness.
That level makes me feel like I'm gonna die here. They're gonna piss on my grave, and my epitaph is gonna be like, rob this grave, Lamau. All in all, Dusk is one of my favorite games ever, and it's one of the few games that I can play several times regardless of what my mood is or what time of the year it is, and I don't really get bored of it, and I just never get tired of it personally. If you're a fan of shooter games, or especially classic FPS games, Dusk should absolutely be on your radar, or better yet, in your Steam cart. and you should already be on the checkout page typing in the 3 funky numbers on the back of your credit card. So we talked about Condemned, we talked about Dusk. What exactly is the point? Well, I'm glad you asked, and to be honest, I don't know. It might have something to do with the title of the video. So the creator of Dusk is making a new game, and I kind of just dubbed the genre to be a Condemned-like. I don't know if that's I don't think that's a term. It's not a term. But I don't care. That's what I'm gonna call it. Currently, there's a playable demo of the game on Steam. The full game is set to release on January 3rd of 2025, just a little over 2 months from now. And the game is called Butcher's Creek. Butcher's Creek takes some heavy inspiration from Condemned. I mean, David himself literally called it Condemned at home. On top of that, it seems like that there's also a good amount of Manhunt inspiration with the snuff film aesthetic that it has. It's very dark and gritty, and there are some areas that are legitimately disturbing to look at, particularly involving the aftermath of tortures and murders. However, there's also a little bit of silliness to it. Like, the basic premise of it is just over-the-top ridiculous, and I'm honestly kind of a fan of it. So you play as an unnamed character, or at least I believe he's unnamed. He comes to the town of Butcher's Creek because he is promised that he will be given snuff films on VHS tapes. That's fucking crazy and ridiculous, and I kind of like it. I am fucking stoked for this game to come out, dude. The dev said that if you're expecting this game to be extremely dark and gritty, you might be disappointed. I think he was talking about the ragdoll physics and being able to spam throwing things at people, or the basic premise of the game. But even with all of those silly things, I still think that the game works in like achieving a dark and gritty atmosphere. Like, I'm not kidding, when I first played the demo, it scared me way more than I thought it was going to originally. I mean, there were times where I was like, you know, beating the living shit out of some tweaker, and then another tweaker comes up behind me and starts beating the shit out of me, and it scares the fuck out of me. That's happened a few times, and it actually gets me pretty good each time it happens. I'm legitimately surprised at how scary the game can be. And I'm pretty sure it's only like 20 or 30 minutes. Like, it's not very long at all. Either way, we get the point. The game is scary. How does it play, though? Like, how does the actual... Did I just fucking spit everywhere? How was the actual gameplay? How was the combat? How does the game function? What are the mechanics? Is it any fun? I can personally confirm that the game is very fun, and I've replayed it several times by now. Of course, I'm not just gonna leave it at that. I'm actually gonna go into detail about the game. Gonna do a bit of a deep dive into, like, how it plays, the mechanics, how it functions. So let us scuba dive into the ocean of game mechanics. And by ocean, I mean pond, because there's not that many, but it's a beautiful pond, and everyone should be swimming in it. Anyways, similar to Condemned, the game focuses entirely on melee combat in first person. There's a small variety of weapons to use. You have the really fast but weak weapons like the box cutter. They're not very useful, to be honest. Then you have the more common weapons like the hammer or the wrench. They swing slower, but they do more damage. Then you have things like a shovel, which swings very slowly, but does a lot of damage. Sort of like a high-risk, high-reward kind of weapon. I personally like the hatchet the best because you can chop their heads off, and it is very satisfying. Now, here's where things get a little odd. When you lose health, you don't regain it by finding a health pack or something as weird and silly as that. You do the normal and sensical thing that everyone should do when they lose health in a video game. You pull out a camera and you take pictures of blood and gore that you find on the walls and the floor and stuff like that. What in the actual shit? So you take pictures of blood. You can kill someone, it splatters blood on the wall, that regains a small amount of health. But then there's like giant splatters of blood that you can find, and you can take pictures of those and regain tons. And then you can find like a printed picture or a Polaroid picture of I guess a snuff picture, a murder picture, and that regains a ton of health. Huh? I promise my reaction is a positive one. I'm just so fucking stumped. Now, here's probably the most interesting mechanic that's... I don't know if it's weirder or not, to be honest, but it's very interesting. When exploring, you find VHS snuff tapes that you can collect. Collecting these tapes will actually increase your maximum health. So you want to find and keep as many of these tapes as possible. But here's the catch. Those tapes that you find, you can actually use those tapes to save your game as well whenever you find a static TV. Saving your game costs 1 tape. So this makes for a little bit of resource management between balancing saving your game and having as much health as possible. And I personally think that makes for a very interesting mechanic. But we're not done with the tapes yet. You can also use those tapes to unlock secret doors, which gets you more weapons. So now it creates this whole balance of saving your game, having as much health as possible, and being able to find new weapons in case yours breaks and you really need a weapon. I forgot to mention that weapons have conditions and they can break, so yeah, there's that too. It's very interesting to me, and apparently the game's not going to be very long, and in my opinion, this little mechanic involving the tapes it makes it much more interesting than I was expecting it to be, a lot more in-depth and more engaging. I don't really know what the right word is, but it feels more detailed than I was expecting it to be, and I'm pleasantly surprised by that. I think Butcher's Creek is fantastic. I think it's great, and I think it's especially great for fans of Condemned, such as myself. I knew the game wasn't going to be as big as Condemned since there's only really one person behind it, but I feel like what he's done with the demo is an exceptional job, and I cannot wait for the full game to release. Yeah, like the demo's only like 20 to 30 minutes. There's really not that much variety in the combat, probably even less than there is in Condemned, but I feel like it does it almost better, and I feel like I almost feel crazy saying that, honestly. Maybe I'm just riding the high of it and I'll probably have my opinion changed, but I recorded footage of Condemned and Butcher's Creek for this video, and I was having more fun with Butcher's Creek. I call me crazy, I don't know. I'm genuinely amazed at how replayable the demo is, and yes, I'm gonna keep replaying it. I don't really know what else to say other than just repeating myself. Like, it's genuinely fantastic. That was a mouthful. The whole point of this video is that I'm just really excited for Butcher's Creek, and I haven't felt this excited to play a game in a really long time. It just feels good to be excited for games again. I don't know how to explain that, but like, I feel like I haven't been excited for a new game in a long time, and with Butcher's Creek, I finally am excited again. I really want it to be good when it fully releases, and knowing the track record of Dusk Dev, I don't think we have anything to worry about. If you're a fan of horror games and brutal combat, I highly suggest playing the game. You're not going to regret it. And that's basically everything from me. If you like this video, feel free to hit those 2 little weird buttons. I believe they're called like the like button and the subscribe button, because I'm going to be making more videos like this. But only do that if you get permission from your little fingies. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Riley Woodsman, and I'll see you in whatever video I make next. But we're not done with the tapes yet. No, I'm not doing that, Jesus.